I'm Jason with Comfort Masters of North Alabama, and welcome to the first video of a series of videos about building a business. Now, this video series is specifically about how I built my business and not telling you how you should build yours. Now, I want to just start by qualifying myself. So I went into business for myself about 18 months ago. I am in the heating and air conditioning industry. My first year, I did $302,000 in total sales. And the majority of that money I didn't get to keep. I invested it back into the business, but I'm well prepared now to jump forward. If I were to have another year like that, it would be extremely profitable. Whereas my first $300,000 year, although profitable, didn't yield me as much money as you might expect. Now, whether or not I have that kind of year again really depends on how well I can hire. So right now I'm trying to hire someone, an experienced service technician, to come in and help carry some of this load. And if I get the right person, I intend to load up and go after it again, although not quite as hard on myself, and not to push that individual as hard either. I would really like someone to come on board and stay on board. But that's a whole topic for another video. I don't want to chase a rabbit right now. But this video today is about why I chose the industry that I'm in, which is the HVAC service industry. Now, again, this is not an endorsement for the HVAC industry, although I think it's a great industry. This is just letting you know, if you're thinking about starting a business, these were the decision-making factors that went into me deciding that HVAC was for me. The very first factor that I had to consider was whether or not I wanted to overcome something called a barrier to entry. Now, barrier to entry is it's an economics term. And I'll just give you the example that was given to me by an economics teacher some years ago. And it is that if you wanted to start a business in internet service provider industry, ultimately, in order to get into that kind of business, your barrier to entry would be the money. It is not just anyone who can decide they're going to start a local internet service provider company. Now, heating and air has its own barriers to entry as well. At least in the state that I live in, the number one barrier is your license. You cannot just go to your local courthouse and give them some money and get an HVAC license. You either have to have a 4-year degree in HVAC from an accredited school, or you have to have, it might be 3 years, but I think it's 2 years of experience working for another company and a signed affidavit by the owner of that company, the license holder, that more or less states that not only are you capable, that they would have trust in you. It's almost like an essay of that person endorsing you to the state. Are you really going to go work for someone else for 3 years just to start that business or not? I think most people would probably say no. So barrier to entry number one for me was the licensing for the state. Now let's kind of compare that real quick to a business that has no barrier to entry, and so that you can kind of understand why that was a plus in my case. So I have a friend who cleans houses, and I've heard him talk about some of the challenges that he faces, and a lot of those are because there is virtually no barrier to entry. Now, if he wants to start a house cleaning business, he just goes to the courthouse, gives them some money, and just like that, they hand him a license. He has a full-fledged business that is ready to start making money. The problem is Debbie down the street. Debbie down the street is that girl who comes in and cuts your throat after you spend the time, effort, and money that it takes to be able to give someone an official estimate, only for Debbie down the street, who is not licensed, to just simply walk in and do it for half the price. People who are in between jobs, or a lot of people just are not good at holding jobs. So when they need a few extra bucks, the gig economy is right there waiting for them. It's very easy to come in and out of on a moment's notice. Now, with the HVAC industry, I already talked about the licensing and the barrier to entry that has. There's also a huge cost. You're probably going to incur some debt getting into the HVAC service industry, which makes it harder to just kind of jump in and jump out at a moment's notice, because now you have bills. You have to be dedicated. You have to be focused on paying your overhead expense. So for me, I had the experience. The barrier to entry was not going to be insurmountable, because industries that have a barrier to entry typically have a better return on your investment. I felt like it was a good way for me to go. So with the first big decision out of the way, The second decision was heavily influenced by my geography. Now, I don't live up on a high mountain or anything like that. When I say geography, what I mean is the part of the country where I live, we have exceptionally brutal summers and fairly mild winters. You know, we'll have a really cold spell here and there, but for the most part, our winters here are pretty easy to get through. You may be thinking that doesn't sound like an advantage. You would think you would want to have a brutal winter too, but here is why that actually plays to my benefit. Every winter, someone goes out of business in the HVAC service industry. And the reason they go out of business is because here, the winter months they're very slow. We just, if you didn't put enough money back in the summertime to make it, you're going to have to borrow money to get through the winter. And then, of course, you're going into summer in even more debt. And then you're going to have to take and first pay that off and then try to stack up enough money to make it through the winter. You get where I'm going. It's a vicious cycle. So if you can manage your money, then you can jump in, make a boatload of money during the summertime, and kind of sit back and coast through the winter with enough money to make it back into the busy season again. And that cycle keeps the numbers. We have way too many of us, way too many HVAC service companies all winter long, and not nearly enough of us all summer. So if we had a brutal winter too, I think what that would eventually lead to is kind of an equilibrium state where we had just as many companies as we needed. And that would create a situation where it would be much harder to actually get your name out there. Because when you have a situation where you have just about the right amount of companies that you need, when a new person pops up, the only way to really compete is by cutting everyone else's throat. And that just sparks what we call a race to the bottom. And in those circumstances, nobody really wins. So the geography did kind of help me lean more toward going into the HVAC service industry. Another one was the area itself. When I say the area, I don't mean the geography. I live in the greater Huntsville area. I don't live directly in Huntsville. But Huntsville, Alabama is growing and is a great market now that it has begun to expand. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, every new customer that comes in could potentially be yours. And for two, every single time you get someone new, they're new to the town, they don't know, they don't have some loyalty to this other HVAC company that's been here for generations and decades. They simply are going to go and find a company that, you know, for whatever reason it is they see on their search results, they like this person. And so it's easy to build your book of business, build your customer base in an area that's growing and has a whole lot of fresh faces. The income of the area was also a big factor. So the greater Huntsville area has a higher than average income for the state, possibly even the southeast, I'm not sure. But at least for where I live, folks around here have a couple of nickels to rub together and do fairly well financially. So, you know, that means when I come to someone and I say, hey, I'm sorry, the repair is going to be kind of expensive. You're looking at, you know, just say $1,800 or something like that. You know, they may hang their heads and stick out their bottom lip about it a little bit, but generally speaking, they have an ability to pay. There are other places where, you know, maybe you live in a place where if someone told you that it was going to be $1,800, you may just have to do without or go buy a window unit or some other kind of scenario where it would make running a business very difficult. So having a customer base that's got a little bit of money goes a long way to the success of a business. Another huge factor was what I'm offering going to be considered a luxury or a must-have. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, where we live, having an air conditioner is not a luxury anymore. Today it is a must-have. Homes are built differently. Houses, built 100 years ago, they weren't designed for air conditioners. They were designed so that hot air would draft up, usually through a cupola or maybe just upstairs windows. We had breezeways. We had all kinds of designs in those homes that allowed for greater airflow. And so when an air conditioner goes out in one of these newer modern homes, it gets hot, and it gets hot fast. Air conditioning is an absolute must-have. And as if it's not enough to be a must-have, it's also fairly recession-proof. And what I mean by that is what I saw when the big COVID scare came. There was a lot of uncertainty. No one knew what was going to happen. A lot of guessing, and we just saw industry after industry being shut down. We're into 2024. We're a long way past the big COVID scare, and I saw an article today talking about movie theaters filing for bankruptcy because they've just never recovered from the COVID pandemic. With the HVAC service industry, what I saw was we actually got busier. People were sent home to work, and people's air conditioners in their homes had been asked to perform more than they had ever been asked to perform before. And so suddenly we had a higher failure rate. In addition to that, when people began to go back to work, we had air conditioners that had been given a long period of rest. Maybe people didn't know there was a problem because there wasn't that much of a load put on them. And we saw a big demand for repairs on commercial equipment as people began to come back to work. And, air conditioners have a given service life. And that service life was still ticking off on all these units. And so the way I look at it, I just don't see a situation where we had like a big rush because of COVID like the automotive industry did. And now we're going to go through a period of where we don't have anything like the automotive industry is having now. What I think we're going to have is just a big jump and really kind of an unnoticeable continuation of the old trend after that. So all of those factors came together and told me, hey, Jason, you got a lot of skill sets. You could market. I have a background in IT. I could go and get a job doing that if I wanted to. I could be a carpenter. I do a lot of woodworking. But ultimately, it came down to HVAC is a good industry to be in for all those factors that I listed. So I hope all of those things have been helpful, maybe in helping you to decide if you wanted to go in whatever direction you wanted to go in. In the next video, we're going to take a look at what I call the 10 most important steps that I took in getting my business off the ground. And if you are thinking of starting a business, hopefully this has helped you in some way. And if it has, let me subscribe, a like, maybe drop a comment as to what you would like me to cover in the next video. So until next time, this is Jason with Comfort Masters of North Alabama, signing off.